This is one of the worst cases of medical neglect I've ever heard. The girl behind me is Danieal Kelly, and unfortunately she really didn't stand a chance with the kind of parents she had. Her story has a lot in common with the trials of Gabriel Fernandez, but she remains relatively unknown, and her story deserves to be heard. This is the story of Danieal Kelly. Reminder that I tell a lot of true crime stories on this channel. The details of this story are pretty horrific, so viewer discretion is advised. So Danieal had a lot of really difficult things she had to deal with since the day she was born. Danieal had cerebral palsy, which impaired her physical and intellectual development. She was just one of 9 children, and their living conditions were deplorable. The entire family lived in a cramped, filthy house with no working toilet. This is Andrea Kelly, Danieal's mom, and she didn't like Danieal very much. She admitted to being embarrassed by Danieal's condition and that she didn't feel comfortable touching her or caring for her medical needs. So she totally neglected Danieal. So neglectful, in fact, that Andrea Kelly's mother took Danieal when she found her when she was 4 years old in a horrible condition. Her hair was one big mat, and she didn't have any teeth left because they had all fallen out. But then something positive happens for Danieal. Danieal moved to Arizona to live with her father and his girlfriend. His girlfriend's name was Kathleen John, and she turned out to be Danieal's guardian angel. While Danieal was in Arizona, she thrived. She was enrolled in school for the first time, where she really flourished. She learned how to talk, she learned how to feed herself. One of the teachers described her as an active learner and one of the sweetest students who had ever been enrolled in the program. It really appeared that while Danieal was living with her father, she was being loved and cared for. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case at all. Turns out her dad was just as neglectful as the mom, and he was actually more violent. The truth is that Danieal's only lifeline was her father's girlfriend. She was the only one who took an interest in Danieal. But then Danieal's father and his girlfriend break up. And that triggered a tragic set of events for her. In 2003, her father abandoned her back into her mother's care, even though he knew this was a danger to her safety and welfare, and he never saw her again. She only survived for 3 more years, and those 3 years were agonizing. By now it was 10 people living in a decaying house without utilities and no beds. Danieal lost the ability to talk or move. She was left in a room by herself with no windows to lie in her own waste, developing huge bed sores, and her mother stopped feeding her. When people asked Andrea why she stopped feeding her daughter, she said it's because she figured if nothing went in, nothing would come out, because she didn't want to touch or clean Danieal. Danieal Kelly was 14 years old when she passed away, and she was only 42 pounds, which is typically how much a 5-year-old weighs, and this was only 3 years after she was put back into her mother's care. They found her in a dark, musty room by herself, and the official cause of death was malnutrition and infection. So in the interest of not sanitizing this story, I do want to add that while I was researching this, her case files include a photo of her body after she was discovered, and I can honestly say that it is one of the worst, most heartbreaking things I've ever seen, and I've seen some terrible things, but it definitely illuminates the depths of human depravity and just how much she really suffered. So be forewarned if you decide to do a deep dive on this case. Now I know you're asking this, and the answer is yes, this was a huge failure on the part of DCFS. DCFS was notified several times on the suspicions that there was mistreatment happening in the Kelly home, and it took them years to follow up. And then when somebody did show up, they just didn't go into the room that Danieal was in. Then when it was discovered that Danieal passed away, they actually forged documents to show that they did their due diligence. The 3 caseworkers were all brought up on charges. Danieal's father was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison, and Danieal's mother pled guilty to 3rd-degree murder charges and is spending 20 to 40 years in prison. The amount of cruelty Danieal experienced in her short life is more than some people will experience in a lifetime. Let's help to keep her memory alive.